This is MichMash, a weekly conversation where we try to unjumble an important and sometimes under-the-radar statewide story that affects you. I'm Cheyna Roth.
And I'm Gorchow. The first Republican has thrown their hat in the ring for the 2026 election for Michigan governor. Eric Nesbitt made the announcement on Tuesday with a video and media blitz.
We need a governor that's willing to show up and work just as hard as they are. Law enforcement, we have your back. Working families, we have your back, so that my kids, the next generation, can inherit a Michigan that's freer, more secure, and more prosperous than the Michigan of today. I'm Eric Nesbitt, small town farm boy, and that's why I'm running for governor.
Okay, let's unpack this announcement. Obviously, from the clip we just heard, Eric Nesbitt has a lot of the usual Republican talking points, supporting Donald Trump, banning sanctuary cities, protections for gun ownership, etc. But let's start by talking a little bit about who Nesbitt is. This is someone who grew up on a centennial dairy farm, knows Michigan agriculture, and is from the small town of Lawton. But he has now served 12 years in the Michigan legislature, and he's known as one of its most astute tacticians.
That's right, Cheyna. Nesbitt clearly caught the political bug at a young age. He worked on congressional and legislative staffs in his 20s, and pretty quickly after winning his first term in the House, impressed as someone who knew how to run a campaign, eventually leading the House Republican campaign efforts. He's currently the top Republican in the Michigan Senate. He represents a Southwest Michigan district that includes fine Michigan communities like St. Joseph, Watervliet, Paw Paw, South Haven, Allegan, and Byron Center. And before he served in the Senate, he was in the House for 3 terms. He also had a brief stint as the lottery commissioner during the Snyder administration. Nesbitt is someone who has shepherded some of the heaviest lifts on major legislation in the last decade. Just 2 examples being the 2017 energy bill and the 2019 auto insurance bill.
But Nesbitt must leave the Senate in 2 years, which even before this announcement led to a lot of speculation about whether he would run for governor in 2026. He's likely going to face strong competition for the Republican nomination. Former Attorney General Mike Cox has formed a committee to raise money while he considers a run. 2022 candidates Tudor Dixon and Kevin Rinke seem interested. Other Republicans' names in circulation are former Speaker of the House Tom Leonard and Congressman John James.
You know, Cheyna, this is a whole new ball game for Nesbitt as far as running for statewide office. He has to introduce himself to the Detroit region where half the votes exist. That's kind of important. He's represented a small piece of the Grand Rapids area, but he's not a household name there either. He's shown he can raise money from top Republican donors when it comes to donations securing Republican control of the legislature, but it's an entirely different scenario making the ask for himself as a gubernatorial candidate. That said, Nesbitt does bring some advantages to this race, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he knows how to build a campaign. This is someone who can appeal both to working class Republican voters with his farming background, note the Carhartt coat in his introduction video, and enjoys support among business-minded Republicans. He has some concrete legislative accomplishments he can tout, and now is the first one in the race. He can start building his campaign and see if he can lock down support from key players.
I'm really curious to see how Nesbitt can translate his success in legislative politics to a statewide race for the biggest office of all. A Democrat who shall remain nameless once said something to me about Nesbitt that I think sums him up pretty well. Nesbitt was up against kind of a fringe conservative character in the Republican primary for his seat in 2018. This Democrat said they were torn because on the one hand, Nesbitt was a really good legislator who would be good to work with on policy. But on the other hand, Nesbitt was such a good political tactician that they feared having to go up against him in campaign battles.
We're going to take a short break here, but when we come back, we're shifting gears and we're going to discuss what's happening with the state's no-fault auto insurance system with Kim Bezy, who leads the organization that manages coverage for those severely injured in traffic crashes. Stick around.
Welcome back to MichMash. I'm Zach Gorchow. We're joined now by Kim Bezy. Kim is the new Executive Director for the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association. Kim, welcome to MichMash, and maybe we should start right away with you giving us the elevator length walkthrough of what the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association is. We're going to call it the MCCA for short.
Absolutely. Zach and Cheyna, thanks so much for having me on MichMash today. I really appreciate it. And the MCCA, as you mentioned, as it's commonly referred to, is actually a private nonprofit association that serves as the state's auto reinsurer. So basically, we are the insurance company for the insurance companies. We've actually effectively allowed the insurance companies to provide generous no-fault coverage that pays for medical care of those who've been catastrophically injured in car crashes. Thousands of Michigan's families actually depend on the MCCA's ability to reinsure their catastrophic injury claims. We are the leading expert in the auto insurance industry, and we have decades of data on Michigan's one-of-a-kind auto insurance system.
So the key thing to remember is that currently, if someone's in a vehicle crash and needs more than $635,000 in medical care for their injuries, that's when the MCCA becomes the insurer instead of the motorist insurance company, right?
So actually, you're still going to get your benefits through your insurance company. And then we reimburse your insurance company for the medical benefits that they're providing to you. But it is based on the year the accident happens, and you are correct in the fact that the current retention level is $635,000.
So one of the big changes motorists have surely noticed since the 2019 law went into effect. Of course, the original no-fault law dates back some 50 plus years. There was a huge change in 2019, which is that, and among those changes, people are likely seeing their insurers sending them forms, offering them the option to select reduced levels of coverage for a lower price than the unlimited benefit if they wish. How is that playing out? Are most people sticking with the unlimited option?
Oh, that's a great question, Zach. So I can say that approximately 31% of Michigan drivers are electing a choice other than unlimited. And definitely from our perspective, we are seeing some great things about 2019 auto no-fault reform, and that it is working to save Michigan drivers money and ensure that the proper funding is available. Pre-reform, pre-2019, people were paying $220 for their MCCA fee. And as of today, it's actually $90 for those selecting unlimited and $20 for those opting for other coverages.
Is that about what you would have expected in terms of choice? I mean, for a long time, there was a refrain among advocates in the legislature for change and in the insurance industry that, why make, all motorists buy the unlimited option, give people choice. But at least, whatever it is, 70% or so are saying, no, we like unlimited. Was that what you expected?
I don't know that I can speak to if that was our expectation, but what I can say is that Michigan is actually the only state in the nation that offers unlimited medical coverage. And the MCCA was formed because of our unique system. So I think it's important to note that the legislature wanted to provide options for people and consumers selecting coverage. So you still have the option for unlimited. Again, we're the only state in the nation to offer that, but now you have choices that you can select a lower limit if you would like to.
So as of June 2024, the MCCA had $22.5 billion in assets and about $24.5 billion in liabilities. So doing some quick math here, that's a shortfall of $2.1 billion. What's driving that shortfall?
So that's a great question, Cheyna. Every year, the MCCA takes a look at the cost of how much it is going to be to care for the thousands of Michiganders that are already one of our catastrophically injured claimants. So we take a look at our total assets and we take a look at those liabilities, how much it is going to cost to pay for their lifetime care. And we determine, are we in a shortfall position or are we in a surplus position? right now, partially as a result of the change after the no-fault reform, the Andary decision occurred. So that changed a little bit about our forecast for how much we would be paying for those injured claimants. And some investment options, those obviously change, which is what resulted in us being in a deficit position.
So the MCCA has a really unique relationship with state government, as you know. It exists because of state law. The director of the Michigan Department of Insurance and Financial Services appoints the board of directors, and that department can examine MCCA operations anytime. But as you said at the beginning, it's a nonprofit corporation and it operates independently of state government. But in 2022, before you became executive director, Governor Whitmer called for the MCCA to provide, I believe it was a $400 per vehicle rebate to motorists based on the surplus the MCCA had at the time, and the MCCA did provide the rebate.
Yes.
How does your organization navigate requests like that from state government, even though technically you operate independently?
That's a great question, Zach. So the statute does indicate, that if we are in a surplus position over a certain percentage, that it's required for us to issue a surplus. But in that particular situation, the board had a conversation and, they determined that it was appropriate to issue the surplus based on the great results that the auto no fault reform were bringing at that time.
Is the rebate responsible in any way for this shortfall currently? There was some criticism of the governor at the time that this was precipitous, and that combined with the Supreme Court decision you mentioned, the Andary decision, has now led to this deficit.
I don't know that I would say the rebate is responsible for it, but I think you bring up a really good point with the Andary decision. So to keep it really simple for those that may not know, the Andary decision effectively decided that the some portions of the auto reform didn't apply to claims that occurred pre that 2019 date. So that took away some of the savings that the MCCA had factored into its surplus decision or its surplus position. So as a result of that, and some of the investments, that we look at how our investments are faring, then when we reevaluated after the Andary decision and the investments, we were then in a deficit position. So a couple of different factors really went into kind of how things have changed.
So Kim, you addressed a bit about how the Andary changes from the Supreme Court ruling affected what the MCCA does, that people who were injured before the 2019 law took effect are now under the old, I guess you could say, fee schedule, or the way payments were handled from insurers to healthcare providers, whereas those who were injured afterward are subject to the fee schedule set in 2019. There was a lot of discussion in the legislature in the last term about whether to just go back to the old system where there was in effect mandatory unlimited coverage for people who suffered catastrophic injuries in traffic crashes, regardless of when the crash occurred. Senate even passed a bill to that effect, although it died in the House. Does the MCCA take positions on legislation? And if so, what's its position on that type of change?
So we really don't take positions on bills. What we strive to do is actually educate policymakers and consumers about the impact of any proposed legislation. So that particular bill that you're talking about, had it passed, it would have removed some of the cost controls that had been put into place in order to reduce out of control medical cost billing, some of the rampant fraud that we see. So if it had passed, it would have actually increased fees for consumers substantially. And that's something that we felt was really important for the legislature to understand before they considered passing that bill.
So how unique is Michigan to handle care for those injured in traffic crashes in this way? Or is there anything that we missed or anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I can't speak to what other states or other systems do, but to the point that you made, Michigan is unique, right? We're one of a kind. We are the only state in the nation that offers unlimited coverage, and the legislature was sure to kind of preserve that option so that people can have, honestly, a great benefit. It allows our insurance companies in Michigan to offer this generous no-fault coverage that pays for catastrophically injured.
Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining us on MichMash and bringing us up to speed on what's happening in the world of the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association.
Thank you so much, Zach and Cheyna, for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks again to our guest, Kim Bezy from the Michigan Catastrophic Claims Association.
MichMash is produced by WDET, Detroit's NPR station, in collaboration with Gongwer News Service. MichMash is hosted and produced by Cheyna Roth, Alethea Casbin, and me, Zach Gorchow. Additional production and editing by Hernz Laguerre Jr., mixing, mastering, and music by Sam Beaubien.
Our digital team is Sophia Joswiak and Jenny Sherman. Our news director is Jerome Vaughn. As always, if you listen to this podcast and want to support it, you can do so by leaving us a review or comment wherever you listen. You can subscribe or follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, basically wherever you get your podcasts.
MichMash is a great opportunity to get your message out to state and local policymakers. To learn more about sponsorship, contact me at this handy email address: advertising@gongwer.com.
Remember, we're produced by a public radio station, which means we are listener supported. So if you really, really like this podcast, you can support WDET by going to wdet.org/give. We'll talk to you next week.